Hello, looks like we're live. Good morning, everybody. I'm Phil Brown, the Director of Land Management with New Hampshire Audubon. I'd love to know if you're all seeing me here, so if you're on this video live, please chime in with a comment. That would be very helpful. Everything sounding good? Can you hear me okay? I see some thumbs ups. Everything good? All right, folks are just starting to join in here. Hello, Andrew, Chris, Jen, another Jen. All right. We're going to wait a little bit here to see if everybody else who wants to watch this live can join in right now. Please send a quick okay if you can hear me all right. Everything sounds loud enough. Let's see. All right, welcome everybody. It's 10 o'clock now, so we're going to begin in just a few minutes here. You might notice that I'm not Becky. I'm Phil Brown, and I'm doing a takeover this week. Apparently that's a thing, a takeover. It's a social media thing that I know nothing about, but admittedly I'm a little bit outside my realm. I'm inside, for one thing. And dealing with some new technology, trying to keep you connected in some new ways. All right, thank you for the feedback here. Sounds good. It looks like we're in, and we have about 12 people watching right now, so thanks everybody for joining live, and that number is growing. Okay. Good. Well, it's not that inspiring a time to be outside at the moment, so hopefully a few more people will decide to join if they're out there. Maybe they're getting a little bit wet today. Some little passing showers in the area where I am. Still, though, rather warm. So, a very interesting November that we have right now. So, please pass some questions along. I will try to keep up with them in the video. And then I'll try to get to those as I can. But I'll jump right in now. And thank you again for joining me. Please bear with me here as I navigate this new way of communicating with you all. So yeah, I've taken over the Facebook Live for Becky this week and for next week as well. And I'm joining you here from my home in Hancock in the Monadnock region of New Hampshire. But talking about a little bit what I do for my position, I'm the Director of Land Management for New Hampshire Audubon. And my responsibilities cover the entire state. We have 39 wildlife sanctuaries with land in every county in New Hampshire. We own over 7,500 acres of land, and we manage this land for wildlife and for people, our dual mission. So we have lots of trails, lots of great places to explore, plenty of wildlife watching opportunities, and lots of habitat management that's going on all the time. And we can't do it without all the volunteers who help make it possible. We have dozens of active volunteers on the sanctuaries, keeping places open and available for the public, helping us manage the wildlife. And I will talk about some of those places today, in addition to some other things. So I'll be taking your questions, trying to get to some of those as they come along. I'll be talking about some of the seasonal happenings in the natural world, with a special focus on birds, especially raptors, which is one of my specialty areas. I also coordinate the Monadnock Raptor Observatory in Peterborough. Who's been there? I'm curious. A show of likes or hands or hearts or whatever. Feel free to pass some comments along about what you're seeing in the world of raptors, in addition to other birds and wildlife. So I'll talk about raptors, wildlife sanctuaries, hopefully get to answer some questions from you all, and hopefully we have the technology gods on our side. It looks like right now things are working pretty well. So chime in with some comments and send some questions my way, please. All right. So we have a warm November underway. This past week has been unseasonably warm with lots of record high temperatures around the state. And I don't think too many people were complaining about this week. It was kind of nice to have a little bit of extra time to be outside with people because we know we're in for a long winter coming up, and winter is good. We need winter conditions in order for our wildlife and plant populations to sustain themselves. So we're looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that anyway. And it does seem like it's about the time now. Cold weather should be coming in. But this warm weather spell has certainly impacted some of the wildlife and some of the plants. So we can talk a little bit about that. But I recall that this period of warm weather, however many days it's lasted now, 7 or 8 days at least, it comes on the heels of two small snow events in the past couple of weeks before that. So that was really interesting. A question coming in from Jane here about red-tailed hawks, and I'll try to get to that. That's a good question. Will they migrate or hang around? I'm going to talk about red-tailed hawks a little bit later, so I'll hang on to that question. So yeah, some of the impacts though. Two snows that happened in October and early November in some parts of the state were fairly significant, dropping several inches of snow. And that certainly moved some of the birds along, but still we're getting a little bit of a delayed fall for some of the birds that are lingering in this area that would otherwise have passed us in earlier years. So it's kind of been a wacky fall once again. We've had a lot of these back and forth falls in the years that I can remember here. So once again, it's a weird weather fall. Some of the species I've been noticing for invertebrates, starting with the invertebrates, the insects around the yard, have been a few late bees and wasps, and even some dragonflies. Caught a look at an autumn meadowhawk not that long ago. This is a smaller dragonfly. I'll attempt to show a photo here, or let's see. Can you see this on my screen? Autumn meadowhawk. This is a species of dragonfly. It's about an inch long, and they're one of the latest dragonflies, usually the latest dragonfly that we have in the state. They're the males are this nice reddish color on the abdomen, and that one was on snow up at Pondicherry Refuge, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So maybe some of you have seen some meadowhawks or some darners, another fairly late species is the common green darner. But there are also ticks around. It hasn't been a bad tick year. I'm starting to wonder where they are, but is anybody here seeing deer ticks in their area? Woodcocks. Okay. Oh, wow. Jane has a couple of late woodcocks hanging around in the yard. That's getting late in any time in November. Let's see. So yeah, ticks. I wanted to put out that public service announcement that we should all be aware of deer ticks right now. It is fall. It's a peak time for ticks generally, but there are a lot of places in the state not reporting ticks at this point. Oh, great. Joanne chiming in about red-tailed hawks. Joanne is one of the coordinators for the Putney Mountain Hawk Watch in Putney, Vermont, and saying that the winds were out of the northwest those snow days, and it was great for red-tailed hawk migration. Yeah, indeed. It was a fantastic push of those at PAC as well. Thanks for sharing that. And we're getting a comment that ticks are also out in southeastern Vermont right now. I guess I've been lucky so far, knock on wood, but they're around, and we should be aware. We shouldn't get too content. Keep doing tick checks. So the other public service announcement I wanted to talk about is hunting season. In New Hampshire, rifle season, which is one of the most popular seasons for hunters, just got underway yesterday. And if you weren't already wearing orange in the woods, you should be now, wherever you are. So that's my public service announcement. I'm going to wear my orange vest right here, just as a reminder. Orange hat isn't a bad idea either. So yeah, be aware of hunters in the woods. Generally though, a lot of New Hampshire Audubon's wildlife sanctuaries are what we call safe places for wildlife, meaning that we don't allow hunting at most of our properties. However, that's not universal, that's not across the board. And there are places that restrict hunting. So, a lot of hikers this time of year enjoy coming to those places where they can feel a little more safe from the sound of gunfire and just being on edge, keeping out for hunters. But it's just a good practice to wear orange no matter where you are. Never really assume that hunting is not permitted somewhere. You'll always want to check the rules and regulations for that particular property. So, check our website as well. I did want to share a resource on hunting here. I'm going to attempt to share some information on the feed here. Bear with me while I try to do that. But yeah, please keep those comments coming. We've had some comments about red-tailed hawks, comments about woodcocks. I'll mention woodcocks. I wasn't thinking of talking about woodcocks today, but they're generally gone by the end of October in our area. However, a few do hang on. The American woodcock, this is an interesting shorebird that flies around in the spring, does these fantastic breeding displays in the spring in fields, usually by the end of March or April in most of our area. Woodcocks are up and about. And here's what an American woodcock looks like. A chunky little shorebird with a long bill. It's a shorebird, but it doesn't have anything to do with the shoreline of oceans or lakes or anything, but they probe in the mud for earthworms in the early spring. And they're typically limited by frozen ground, so it's not surprising that woodcocks would be hanging on this year. But generally they're going to be south of Massachusetts, Connecticut in the winter. It's not winter yet, so you may get some lingering woodcocks for the next couple of months, a couple of weeks anyway. But once that cold weather comes, that should really usher them along. So hopefully at that point you won't be seeing them, Jane, because they may not make it at that point. Let's see. So yeah, keep those comments coming in. We talked about hunting a little bit. I'll talk a little bit more about Audubon sanctuaries, since that is my realm at New Hampshire Audubon. And this week, I went out and recreated at one of my favorite local places. That is the Willard Pond Wildlife Sanctuary in Antrim and Hancock, New Hampshire. It's our largest, Audubon's largest wildlife sanctuary at 1,700 acres. So it's a really massive wooded area with some other habitat variations, such as large wetlands. And it's surrounded by another 1,100 acres or so of conservation easement land that Audubon monitors and maintains. And in addition, 25,000 acres around that is all connected and protected, so conserved land. It's been a real success project for a lot of the local land trusts and state organizations. So a really fantastic area to explore and a place to check out if you haven't been there. So I was there with my kids. I went out there canoeing this week. It was just such a great time because you don't think of November canoeing. I don't usually. But we took advantage of the weather to get out and paddle around Willard Pond. So bring a boat. You set in at the boat launch It's at the end of a road, and it's the only thing that's developed on the whole pond. It's a 100-acre pond. Looks more like a lake, but you can paddle around. It's surrounded by wooded hills in every direction, and you can see loons there in the summer. Loons breed and usually raise 1 or 2 young. Ospreys and eagles fish there on a daily basis in the summer. It's a great place for bird song in every direction. We've done a lot of habitat management to specifically bring in some of the younger forest songbirds by creating some patch cuts in some of the surrounding hills. And then there's a large area that is just never going to be cut too. So a lot of it is designated or unofficially designated wilderness, but just because of the terrain, we are going to leave it alone indefinitely. So it'll be a great chance for a lot of the species that are dependent on older growth conditions to thrive in this area. So it was just a completely still, silent place this week. A real difference from a busy summer day when a lot of people are out there swimming and paddling. We had the whole pond to ourselves. It was really breathtaking, and it was kind of past foliage. There were still a few trees hanging on, some of the oaks. And the loons had moved on, and the people had moved on. And we were thrilled to see a Northern Shrike flying right over the pond and landing on our favorite little island, Blueberry Island out at the far end. And briefly alighted on top of a dead tree. And a Northern Shrike is a really interesting, fascinating little songbird. That is kind of an honor. You see they have this dark mask, dark wing patch, and otherwise kind of gray and white. And they're fascinating because they are predatory on mammals, a lot of insects, and also on small songbirds. So you don't think of a songbird eating other songbirds, but shrikes do that. They're not raptors, but they do snag songbirds with that hooked bill that they have. So I didn't see that happening. I've seen them chasing birds in the past and eating birds, but didn't get to see that this time. That book that I was checking out here, by the way, is the Sibley Guide to Birds of the Eastern Region. One of many excellent field guides. And this is an older version, I think. And I also enjoy this smaller pocket guide of the Stokes Field Guide to Birds, a central pocket guide to birds of North America. This one has kind of representative photos, and the Sibley Guide uses all of David Sibley's wonderful illustrations. So yeah, so shrikes. Shrikes are starting to come down into the state. They're flying around, showing up in certain places, usually in larger open areas, such as fields, wetland edges. They like open areas, but they also will come into your backyard, chasing the small songbirds that are starting to show up everywhere. And I'll talk about what's coming in the way of songbirds pretty soon. So the shrike, the other interesting thing about them, they impale small birds and their prey on thorns and other spikes, even using barbed wire fences. So it's kind of neat to come across a little cache of food, and they'll save it for later. They're known as the butcher bird for that reason. One other thing about shrikes is that they employ a mimicry by evolving to look like a bird that is harmless, the northern mockingbird. They're basically the same size, the same shape, and the same pattern as a mockingbird. So that's really fascinating. Bluebirds. Questions about bluebirds are coming in. And do bluebirds migrate soon? I've had several at my feeders, asks Harriet. Yes, Harriet, bluebirds do migrate. They have been migrating recently. I'd say October and November are the big months for bluebird migration. You'll see little flocks of them flying over in the early morning hours, working their way south in small groups of just a couple to maybe a dozen. You'll see them gathering in fields and field edges right now, and they will come into feeders. They especially prefer mealworms And in recent decades and years and decades, the bluebirds have been sticking around more at bird feeders too, and staying in this region. So we're seeing record numbers of bluebirds on some of the Christmas bird counts in the past decade across the Northeast. So yeah, bluebirds, a bird that is adapting to maybe our warming climate, maybe more of an invasive food source, which isn't always the best thing for them, but maybe also benefiting from backyard bird feeding. So keep up those feeders. And we'll talk about feeders really soon too. I was going to put in a plug for the New Hampshire Birds Listserv as a great way to find out what's happening in the way of birds. And also New Hampshire eBird. Maybe somebody's able to post a link. I haven't been able to share a link yet. So I mentioned Willard Pond. We talked about that one sanctuary. There'll be other sanctuaries to talk about as well later on in the conversation. A couple of things to do at Willard Pond if you don't want to canoe. Another option is to hike. We have about 5.5 miles of hiking trails, and the most popular vantage point is on Bald Mountain with a beautiful view of Willard Pond, and I think I actually do have a photo of that, so let me go to the photo page here. Bear with me. Oh yeah, here we go. So this was the other evening out at Willard Pond. Looking from the far end of the lake out into the Monadnock region, and it was just almost perfectly still with some beautiful low light. So keep those questions coming in, please. Oh yeah, I wanted to put in a plug here for an excellent resource that I happen to have right in front of me now, a little bit early for the year, but this is brand new, hot off the press. A new Nature Almanac and Calendar. I can't read backwards, I guess. And you can't either, probably. Nature Observed in the Backyard and Beyond by Francie von Mertens, who is an honorary trustee of New Hampshire Audubon. And Francie has put a ton of research into this guide, which has representative photos for each day of the year, and a whole story with natural history information to go along with it. It's an excellent resource and a must-have, really a timeless guide here, even though it is based on the calendar year of 2021. I'd encourage you to pick one of these up. They will be sold at local bookstores and also through the Harris Center, one of our partner organizations. Willard Pond is featured prominently in this Nature Almanac and Calendar. So pick one of those up. What's going on in the world of birds this week? Let's talk about birds in New Hampshire. November is a great month for vagrants and for late fall migration. And while we haven't had the same kind of success that Rhode Island has had with some really wacky birds from all different places across the ocean, such as the common cuckoo of European and African origin, we have had some luck from birds showing up from places where they're not. It's one of the things that excites bird watchers and people who keep life lists. So lately there have been some birds from the south and the west, and even from other directions, but not from overseas, from Europe, really. The most interesting of those, I should say, has probably been the white-winged dove that showed up last weekend at a bird feeder in Concord, right in the capital city of Concord. It's only the 4th record in state history, so a pretty exciting species from the kind of the desert southwest, the scrubby riparian areas of the southwestern U.S. and also southern Florida. So who knows where this bird got here from, but it somehow found its way to Concord, New Hampshire. I don't know if it took the express jet stream that we've been getting, all this southern flow of air from the south, or maybe some of the tropical air that has been coming up from the Gulf with various storms. Has anybody seen this white-winged dove? Anybody watching? It's apparently one that that you can go and see. I haven't seen it myself yet, but it's been around for a few days already. Other than the rarities, the winter finches have been one of the other highlights. Winter finches are these eruptive species that have been coming down and migrating across Canada and the northern U.S. to get to our supply of cones, typically, or food crop, in the form of white pines and spruces and birches. So it's a whole slew of species that we don't normally see. We're familiar with finches like the American goldfinch, the purple finch, which is New Hampshire's state bird. Those are semi-eruptive as well. Purple finches certainly do migrate in large numbers and can be very eruptive, disappearing from the state for long stretches of at a time. Right now, they have pushed south already in large numbers. But the exciting ones that we don't get to see every year are the ones I'm talking about now, the pine grosbeaks, large reddish birds with white wing bars. I'll show you an image of one of these in the guide. Pine grosbeak. So male on the bottom, female and immature look a little more gray overall with a yellowish head. But yeah, these males are kind of large, chunky birds, about 7 or 8 inches in size. They have this big, thick bill. The term grosbeak, or large beak, refers to that. And they're similar to the evening grosbeak in some ways, at least in name, even though they are in a different genus. Evening grosbeak also has a massive bill and are also erupting this year in large numbers. Maybe the biggest influx of evening grosbeaks this year in the past 25 years, some are saying. So it's super exciting to think we might get to see these giant yellow finches at our feeders to throw in some color in an otherwise, can be kind of a gloomy time of year. So feed the birds responsibly, feed them what they want to eat, and I'll talk about what kind of food to put out later, and maybe even give you a little demonstration of my own feeders downstairs. Let's see. So pine grosbeaks, pine siskins, evening grosbeaks. The siskins in particular are pushing through in large waves of dozens to even hundreds of birds. These are a smaller finch, the size of a goldfinch, mostly brownish, but they have a splash of yellow, especially when they open their wings up. And they're a lot of fun to watch. They're invading from the north, and following on their heels, we have common redpolls coming down, which are also a small finch, like a goldfinch. Pine siskin here, with the yellowish in the wings. They have a smaller conical bill, smaller than the grosbeak anyway. And common redpoll, a flashy little bird. They have the males have a lot of red on the throat. They have a red cap and black throat, white wing bars, and these are really congregatory birds that will show up in large numbers together. So get your feeders ready for them. Redpolls and siskins in particular will eat thistle seed, and they'll also chow down on shelled sunflower seeds. So if you can get the sunflower hearts, they really like those too. And redpolls are showing up because the Canadian birch crop is poor this year. That's probably why redpolls are pushing south. Crossbills, which I think Becky has talked about in past weeks, have been invading from the west and the north, and we even have some coming in from, I want to say like the northwestern, the Pacific Northwest, even into Alaska and western Canada, and they're migrating across the continent to get to our food crop here. So it's a shortage of food that drives this periodic eruption, and they're tied into cycles that have to do with the trees producing seeds at certain times. This year we have a banner year for white pine in our area, and white pine is loaded with cones right now. So the red crossbills in particular are enjoying pulling the seeds out of white pines. Here are the red crossbills with their really unusual bills that do kind of cross each other at the tip. I'm not sure if you can see this too well, it's kind of blurry. Male crossbills, reddish, females are yellowish, and the juveniles are streaky and brown. So you may see these. Best way to find finches is really knowing their call. So they're usually flying over unless you can find a place where they're feeding. So just be aware of what's flying over. If you have binoculars, try to follow it and see if they come down. So let's continue talking about other eruptives. The Boreal Chickadees. This is an exciting one that doesn't show up every winter or even every 5 or 10 winters south of the White Mountains where they nest. Boreal chickadees are formerly known as brown-capped chickadees, and they're unlike anything that comes to your bird feeder unless you live in far northern New Hampshire or northern New England. But this year, for whatever reason, boreal chickadees are starting to show up in places south of the White Mountains, and they're a really beautiful little bird here. I'll get an image of one that I took at Monadnock about a month ago. So, Boreal chickadee here. It has a brownish cap instead of a black cap. It has these rusty, kind of tan-colored sides, so a little more coloration than the black cap chickadee, which is just generally more black and white overall. So brown-capped chickadees. Exciting little birds. They have a hoarse-sounding call. It's kind of a slower chickadee, slower and deeper and raspier. So the winter finch forecast is a great resource for letting folks know about what you might be seeing and what these finches are tied to. Do a Google search for it, winter finch forecast, and it has all the information you want to know about what's going on this winter. Let's see. Bird feeders. I'll talk about bird feeders. What else is going on in the state for bird life? Some birders have been offshore on pelagic trips recently, turning up tube noses and alcids. These are birds like shearwaters, fulmars, even Atlantic puffins have been seen. Puffins start to show up a little bit south in the Atlantic now, south meaning off of our coastlines, but you have to go pretty far out to see them, usually 10 miles or further, to see some puffins. And they don't look as flashy as they did in the middle of the summer. But there's been some great weather, so birders took advantage of that and saw quite a few species offshore. The seacoast is also a great place to go birding right now. There's a lot to see in the terms of shorebirds, ducks, raptors, late migrating songbirds. One species in particular that has been pretty exciting this year has been snow bunting, showing up in large numbers. Snow buntings are kind of a black and white, mostly a white songbird. An image here of a snow bunting from, again, Monadnock. There was just one lone bird, a beautiful little songbird of the open plains and the Arctic that shows up every winter, usually migrating through in November in our region. But there have been some flocks of up to 500 snow buntings at Hampton Beach State Park in the past week. So that would be pretty exciting to see these little guys with white wings. When they open up their wings, they're really flashy and white. This is one interesting species that actually I would say is more colorful in the winter than it is in the summer, which is a little bit of a reversal. We usually think of birds becoming more drab in their basic winter plumage. But buntings get this nice rich reddish coloration. In summer they're more black and white overall. And in Concord, an exciting birding event that the birding community and especially a group of Concord area birders has been excited about is the Concord November Challenge. Pam Hunt from New Hampshire Audubon has coordinated this event over the last decade and a half, I want to say. And she and a bunch of other birders went out last weekend and tallied a whopping 96 species of birds just within the city limits of Concord. So great job to the Concord birders for finding birds at a little bit of a time of year where people are not as motivated to get out birding. So that's part of the motivation of this Concord November Challenge, is to get people outside at a time of year when a lot of interesting things are still around, but a lot of people hang up their binoculars for the fall. There's still plenty to see in November, especially this November, for whatever reason, and combination of reasons, with the winter finches coming down, with a lot of late songbirds hanging around, and just good timing with ducks and waterfowl and raptors. So good year, and across the state, birders are motivated this month by an event that spun off of that one called the New Hampshire November Challenge, getting people out in every county of the state to try to see the greatest percentage of species compared to the total recorded in that county historically for the month of November. So again, another creation of Pam's, and it's motivating the birding community to go out in their own communities and in their own neighborhoods and counties to find birds throughout the month, when there are a lot of possibilities for odd birds to stick around in November. So get out there and bundle up in the next few days. It's going to get colder, but still plenty to see. Good places to check in general this time of the year are field edges, open fields themselves. Field edges will kind of hang on to a lot of the late songbird activity. Groups of sparrows have been notable lately. In the past week, I've been seeing a lot of fox sparrow and American tree sparrows. These are two of the later migrants that we see in our area. They'll mostly pass through, but tree sparrows will winter at bird feeders. American pipits in open fields, along with horned larks and snow buntings. These are birds of the open country. So these are a few species that you could see in November. But other places to go would be bodies of water right now. Before lakes and ponds have frozen, there are lots of ducks starting to stage. The ducks are ushered by the changing conditions, ushered south. So ducks will be staging in lakes and ponds until the freeze comes. So get out now and look for some concentrations. Perhaps in the next cold front we'll get another push of ducks from the north. And common mergansers are fun to watch in this time of the year. They're very actively feeding, skimming the surface of the water, just below the surface really. They swim really fast in pursuit of fish. These are a classic lake and river duck, not one typically found on the open ocean in our area. So common merganser, an attractive duck here, with a dark head. The males have a dark head, a very whitish body. Females have a semi-crest here, brownish head, grayish body, and they're long and sleek, and they have these long, slender bills that are good for grabbing fish. Their more oceanic counterpart is the very attractive red-breasted merganser. So you'll see those in the coastal areas. Lots of other duck possibilities too, but we can talk more ducks next week. It's another favorite topic of mine. Well, let's see. For my own contribution to the November Challenge, I've been spending more time in my own backyard. I've been doing that all year. The pandemic has really helped me get a little more grounded right in my own neighborhood, and it's helps also bring a more mindful approach to bird watching, to be more meticulous about what I'm observing, really looking at things a little more closely. Listening to the species warning calls has been a lot of fun, getting familiar with how the birds communicate with each other. The other day I heard a signal go across the woods, a warning call that started with the chickadees. They saw something. The chickadees saw it first. They gave their high-pitched dee-dee-dee. I knew it was some sort of aerial predator. And then the blue jays started shrieking, caw-caw-caw. And then my chickens started running. So it was connected between those three species, all within split seconds. And sure enough, a Cooper's hawk came tearing through the yard right in front of me. I was outside in the backyard, and the Cooper's hawk nearly grabbed a blue jay. my chickens were safe, so they can get picked off once in a while too, but they ran off for cover. So it's really neat to see how birds really connect to the natural worlds and are connected to each other too. So that's just one example of things you could learn by looking at the same thing every day. Let's move on to raptors, since I did talk about the Cooper's hawk. That's a good segue. Raptors. Migration is still going on, even though it's mid-November now. As the coordinator of the Pack Monadnock Raptor Observatory in Peterborough, I also get a unique chance to be there in person about once a week, and I've been covering every Tuesday as the official counter. This is a project, by the way, that dates back 16 years to its founding by New Hampshire Audubon. So for 16 years we've been counting raptors throughout the fall with a very specific protocol, regularly collecting this data. And we have 16 years now of data, which has really taught us a lot of things about raptor migration in this region, how and when birds move. Just the fact that we have golden eagles passing over our airspace is one of these revelations that this project has helped us learn. But so much more than that too. Now it's a collaboration between New Hampshire Audubon and the Harris Center, and this project averages about 11,600 raptors per season. That's what we see in the average fall. 75% of that is broad-winged hawks, which mostly all happen in September. So right now we're really at the tail end of it. But November is the month for red-tailed hawks, and earlier the question came in about red-tailed hawk migration. What's going on? Do they migrate out? Do they stay? The answer is both. Red-tailed hawks, it's been shown, individual red-tailed hawks can migrate some winters and stay put some winters. It kind of depends on the conditions and the food, most likely. And they don't migrate very far when they do go through our region. We may be getting some from further north in Canada that do have to go further, but our local red-tails probably only go a few hundred miles south. That's what we're starting to learn from different research that's been done. So it kind of depends, but we are seeing more red-tailed hawks wintering further north and fewer migrating south past our observatory every fall. And so that may be a trend that has to do with climate change as well. In the past decade in particular, sites all around the Northeast, these are hawkwatch locations, have found that they're seeing fewer red-tailed hawks each fall migrating by. It's not because the population is declining. That's been shown that the population is shifting. So there's more going on in the north. So last Tuesday, I was up at PAC and hoping for a few birds, and what we had was 5 migrating birds. It was a slow day. In 6.5 hours, we counted 5 migrant birds, but on a good push, like the winds starting to turn around from the west like they are right now, following that cold front that's passing through today, it's bound to get good again for the next few days, as the winds will be at the birds' backs, pushing them south. I expect golden eagles in the next few days too. We average about 7 golden eagles a year at PAC, and right now we're at 5. We've had as many as 22 on a really good year. So we're due for a few goldens. So if you do want to visit the park, it's worth making a reservation, going online to Miller State Park. And a couple of images that I wanted to share here. This is not my photo, but a bird that needs no introduction here, the adult bald eagle. We're almost at a record high with bald eagles right now. 177 have flown by the Hawkwatch this year, and there are about 3 more to go, I think, before we break another record for bald eagles. It's been such a good year for them. Red-tailed hawk, the bird that we've been talking about, the bird of November at the Hawkwatch, makes up about half of the migrants that we see, the overall migrants that we see in the month of November. So come out, see some red-tailed hawks migrating by. They should really be pushing through after this next cold front. let's see. Yeah, I'll talk more about raptors next week. I wanted to wait until next week to do more of a summary about what we've seen and how that compares to past years. But, oh yeah, other raptors, owls. It's a time to hear some owls right now. Owls are pretty vocal in my backyard, at least the barred owls are. Bards are the most common and commonly encountered owl in New Hampshire overall. In most of our state, it's likely that barred owls would be the owl that somebody has in their backyard. However, we have other resident owls like great horned owl, a little bit less common, and eastern screech owl in the southern and southeastern part of the state, predominantly. There are a couple of migrating owls, northern saw-whet owls, which have been showing up in recent weeks, and it's actually a record year for saw-whet owl migration in some areas of the country. So it looks like that species should be pushing south. Try to get out at night and listen for them, although they don't do a lot of their classic whistle calling at this time of the year, so it's a little harder to detect, but pay attention to those warning calls. Chickadees can give away owls if there's persistent mobbing behavior with the songbirds in a dense conifer stand. You might want to check it out and see what the chickadees have. But barred owls, I've been seeing a surprisingly large number of dead ones this time of the year on the roadsides. Has anybody else been noticing owls, live or dead? Feel free to chime in with a comment on owls and any other questions you have at this point. We'll be wrapping up shortly here. I realized I'm going well beyond my allotted time, but it's hard to stop talking about nature. But yeah, I will start to wrap it up here by talking a little bit about leaves. Let's switch kingdoms here to the plants. Mainly praising the leaf season that we just had. For me, one of the silver linings was getting to see the transition of seasons from pretty much one home base, more than usual, doing a little bit less traveling than in past years. And this was a really great grounding experience, being able to see each species of tree and even individual trees go through the process of fall foliage. And it was a great foliage season, I have to say. I think it was the best one I can remember, and I don't know if that's just because I was looking a little more closely this year, but it was a long season, and even though it's early November, there are a few trees that I wanted to talk about really quickly. The Aspen Trees, one of the last to hold on to some golden leaves this time of the year, the quaking and big-tooth aspens. And, of course, the less common tamarack. The tamarack is known as the American larch. And though I'm looking out the window, the leaves have mostly fallen off of my tamarack at this point. This is what it looked like just a few days ago on a sunny day. Really glowing golden color. So a nice early November species. And tamaracks usually grow in areas all together in large wetland areas. I went up to the Pondicherry Sanctuary, really one of New Hampshire Audubon's crown jewel sanctuaries, to witness the golden tamaracks a couple of weeks ago, and I got lucky with tamarack color at the edge of Little Cherry Pond, and also snow in the White Mountains. Let me show you one more photo here. Yeah, so there was snow up in the Whites. It's a photo of Mount Washington with a bald eagle flying over Cherry Pond. That really was the icing on the cake for me. But it was an exceptional year for foliage, so just wanted to pay tribute to one of my favorite and generally underlooked trees, the tamarack, which is New England's only deciduous conifer. So a conifer species that loses its needles every year and grows them back in the spring. So Pondicherry, one last plug for visiting a sanctuary. You still have time before it's blanketed with snow again. It was snowy a couple weeks ago, but that has melted since. Pondicherry is up in the White Mountains, kind of the low-lying component of the White Mountain National Forest, but it's owned in partnership between New Hampshire Audubon, which is the founding partner and the initial landowner at Pondicherry. And the refuge has now expanded to 6,500 acres and is owned largely by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a national wildlife refuge. So great place to go, lots of hiking opportunities there, lots of ducks this time of the year before the lake freezes. And with that, I wanted to just talk about next week a little bit. That's about all the time we have this week. It's really went over the time, so thanks for sticking with me, everybody. And I look forward to continuing my takeover next week, as I'll be discussing the end of raptor migration, talk a little bit more about other wildlife sanctuaries to visit in the state, and we'll have a peek into nocturnal mammals through the lens of my own trail camera, and we'll talk about whatever else you might have questions about outside your window. So thank you for joining me, and thanks for joining New Hampshire Audubon and supporting us. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again. Take care.